The afternoon sun hung high over the cul-de-sac, casting a honeyed glow over the manicured lawns and pristine facades of the upscale neighborhood. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and the faint, sweet perfume of azaleas in full bloom. A large moving truck was parked in the driveway of a newly constructed white mansion, its tires leaving faint impressions on the smooth asphalt. Experienced workers in blue uniforms moved with quiet efficiency, carrying in designer furniture wrapped in padded blankets, each piece a testament to years of relentless labor. I stood on the lush green lawn, my heels sinking slightly into the damp soil, and watched them. The house behind me was worth $1.2 million. Its white exterior gleamed like a pearl under the sun, and its tall, arched windows reflected the blue sky in perfect stillness. It was mine. Every brick, every beam, every carefully selected light fixture, bought with money I had earned. Money I had bled for. And then I heard it. "Whose house is this?" It was my mother's voice. The first time I had heard it in person in 3 years. I didn't turn around immediately. I let the sound wash over me, a voice I had once longed to hear, now cold and sharp as a winter wind. It wasn't the tone of a mother worried about her daughter's safety. There was no warmth, no tremor of relief. Instead, it was suspicious. Clinical. The way you might speak about a stray animal that had wandered into your garden. I turned slowly. There they were, my father, Richard Fisher, standing stiff in a polo shirt and pressed khakis, my mother, Eleanor, her hand frozen mid-gesture, and my twin sister, Jenny, looking like a porcelain doll dressed for a country club lunch. They had been taking a walk through the neighborhood, likely visiting one of my father's golf buddies. Their faces were frozen in identical expressions of absolute judgment. In my mother's eyes, I saw the rapid calculation. The very fact that I was standing on the lush green lawn of this upscale neighborhood must have shaken her sense of what was normal. Seeing me dressed in a refined, high-quality dress, a cream silk sheath I had bought from a designer whose name she would recognize, probably only added to her confusion. And yet, her gaze completely ruled out the possibility that I might be the owner of this house. At best, she likely assumed I was some kind of personal assistant. A hired hand. A servant serving the wealthy residents who lived here. Nothing more than that. In her eyes, pity and contempt blended together effortlessly, a toxic cocktail she had perfected over decades. Behind me stood my home. Behind me stood proof of my worth. And in front of me stood the 3 people who had declared me worthless. I observed their shaken expressions calmly. I wasn't surprised. I had always known a day like this would come. No. Perhaps I had been living all this time precisely for this moment. Somewhere deep inside, I had been waiting for the instant when their faces would be painted with shock, shame, and despair. Before I spoke, I closed my eyes for just a second. What flashed through my mind was the cold, silent dining room from 3 years ago. The place where everything began. 3 years earlier. A gray November evening. The dining room of my parents' house was a study in oppressive elegance. A long mahogany table, chairs upholstered in cream-colored fabric that no one was allowed to sit on, and a crystal chandelier that cast sharp, fractured light across the walls. The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary hung in the air, but no one was eating. My college acceptance letter lay on the table. The envelope was torn open. The letter itself was face up, the university's crest visible in gold foil. I had been accepted. Early decision. A good school. Not Ivy League, but respectable. I had worked for it, studied through sleepless nights, foregone parties, sacrificed friendships. I had done everything right. But I wasn't Jenny. Jenny, my twin sister, sat across from me. Her acceptance letters had arrived weeks ago. She had been accepted to a prestigious university with a $65,000 annual tuition. Our parents had thrown a party. There had been champagne. There had been tears of joy. Our father had made a toast to our Jenny, the future of this family. Now it was my turn. My father picked up my letter with the same expression he might have used to examine a disappointing quarterly report. His reading glasses perched on his nose. He scanned the page, then set it down. "Kelly," he said. His voice was flat. Businesslike. We've made a decision. I remember gripping the edge of my chair. My knuckles turned white. We'll send Jenny to a prestigious university, he continued. The $65,000 annual tuition is a matter of pride for us. She will network. She will build connections. She will bring value to this family. He paused, looked at me, and then delivered the words that would become the foundation of my life. But you're different, Kelly. Investing in someone as introverted as you won't bring any returns. You don't have Jenny's charisma, her social skills, her potential. Get a job immediately. Leave this house. Become independent. My mother didn't object. She dabbed at her lips with a cloth napkin and looked away. Jenny? Jenny smiled. A small, private smile, and sipped her water. No congratulations. No encouragement. Not even a shred of affection. Just an expulsion notice delivered like a cold business decision. That night, I packed a single suitcase. I had saved $3,000 from part-time jobs, money I had hidden in a shoebox under my bed. I rented a tiny studio apartment in a bad part of town. The walls were thin. The heater made a rattling sound. The neighbors argued at 2 a.m. But it was mine. And as I lay on the lumpy mattress that first night, shivering under a thin blanket, I made a silent promise to myself. Will become someone they cannot ignore. And when that day comes, I will remember everything. I didn't have the luxury of despair. The first year was survival. I found a clerical job at a small real estate agency, filing paperwork and answering phones for $15 an hour. My boss, a portly man named Mr. Hendricks, had a habit of throwing paper clips at my head when he was frustrated. I learned to dodge. I also learned something more important: how real estate actually worked. How deals were structured. How marketing could make or break a sale. At night, I studied. I took online business courses, digital marketing, SEO, copywriting, finance. I used the office printer to print out PDFs after everyone else had gone home. I ate instant ramen 3 nights in a row. I told myself it was fuel. By the end of the first year, my freelance income had surpassed my office salary. Small jobs at first. Writing website copy for local businesses, managing social media accounts for startups. Then bigger jobs. A regional retail chain hired me to overhaul their online presence. I worked weekends. I worked holidays. When Jenny posted photos from college parties on social media, I was drafting proposals. When my parents vacationed in Hawaii, I was refining client pitch decks. The key to success was reading the situation. I found a niche market that no one else was paying attention to. Small to medium construction suppliers who had no digital presence. I poured everything I knew into it. At first, no one cared. But just as I had predicted, the market expanded rapidly. My name slowly began to circulate within the industry. I was lucky with connections, too. Clients who appreciated my passion and integrity introduced me to other clients. By my second year, I went from being a sole proprietor to founding a company. I called it Pfizer Enterprises, my last name, but twisted slightly. A small act of reclamation. By the third year, my company's annual revenue surpassed $1 million. I blocked my family on every social media platform. I cut off contact with anyone we both knew. They had no way of knowing what my life had become. They had thrown me away. And in that very moment, they realized that what they had discarded had turned into a shining diamond. But I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. I opened my eyes. The summer afternoon returned. The moving truck. The house. My family standing before me, their faces frozen in shock. Kelly, my mother said again. Her voice had softened now, coated in a layer of false warmth. Is that really you? Oh my goodness. Look at you. I said nothing. I let her squirm. My father stepped forward. His jaw was tight. What is the meaning of this? His voice was harsh, interrogative. There's no way someone like you could afford a house like this. Someone like you. The words hit like a slap. Even now, even with the evidence of my success standing behind me in gleaming white stone, he couldn't see me as anything other than the daughter he had discarded. I've been working, I said calmly. Working? He snapped. Doing what exactly? His tone grew even more aggressive. I could see the suspicion coiling behind his eyes. He probably suspected something illegal, drugs, fraud, a wealthy older man. To him, my success wasn't something to celebrate. It was an anomaly. A threat to his worldview. My mother hurriedly grabbed my father's arm. She turned a strained smile toward me, the kind of smile you give a difficult client. Please stop. Don't interrogate Kelly like that. Oh my, Kelly. This is truly amazing. Such a wonderful house. You really worked so hard all by yourself. We're so sorry we didn't know anything. Why didn't you contact us even just once? We could have celebrated for you. Her words flowed smoothly, as if she had rehearsed them in advance. The ability to instantly assess a situation and adopt the most self-serving attitude possible, that talent of my mother's almost inspired a sense of admiration in me. But I could see the calculation behind her words as clearly as if it were written on her forehead. If this house hadn't been behind me, she would still assume I was nothing more than a servant. The speed with which she changed sides spoke more eloquently than anything else about who she really was. My father cut in, interrupting her. Don't say such stupid things. This doesn't make any sense. Kelly, tell the truth. What kind of work did you do to get the kind of money it takes to buy a place like this? There was no concern in his voice. What showed through instead was his desperate need for my success to be the result of something shady. Something he didn't have to accept as legitimate. More than anything, he was afraid of the collapse of the story he had always believed in, that outgoing Jenny would succeed and introverted Kelly would fail. I looked at them one by one. My sister Jenny stood in silence. Her beautiful features were twisted, a mixture of jealousy and confusion. She kept glancing back and forth between my face and the luxury house behind me. Her sense of superiority had always depended on my existence as the unremarkable younger sister. That assumption was crumbling right in front of her. Did they really deserve to hear about my past 3 years? About the night I was thrown out? About the rundown apartment, the unreasonable boss, the sleepless nights? About the instant meals eaten alone while they dined as a family? No. They had no right to my story. I don't need to explain myself to you, I said quietly. What matters is the fact that I bought this house with my own strength. The daughter you decided had no value. The words struck deep. My father faltered, momentarily at a loss. My mother's forced smile vanished. Jenny looked away awkwardly. They hadn't expected me to bring up the past. Or maybe they had assumed I would forget. But for me, that declaration had never faded. It had become my driving force. I continued. 3 years ago, you didn't give me a choice. You just told me to leave. But because of that, I became free. Free from your values and your judgments. For the first time, I was able to design my own life. Silence fell between us, heavy, suffocating. And then, as if on cue, a broad-shouldered man approached. He was the moving company site supervisor, clipboard in hand, wearing a blue polo shirt with the company logo embroidered on the chest. He checked his documents and addressed me with professional deference. Miss Fisher? As scheduled, we'll move the large server racks into the second-floor office of Pfizer Enterprises. May I request your confirmation as its CEO? The word landed like a grenade. CEO. I saw all 3 of them freeze. My father's eyes widened in disbelief. My mother murmured under her breath, Pfizer Enterprises, a company CEO. Perhaps they had assumed I was simply a highly paid employee at best. But the fact that I was the owner of a company, more than the value of the house itself, forced them to confront the true scale of my success. I smiled and nodded to the site supervisor. Yes, please go ahead. The wiring team will come in this afternoon, so installation alone is fine. My father stared at me, stunned, as I issued instructions with practiced ease. The expression on his face shifted from shock to confusion, and then gradually to unmistakable panic. I didn't miss that change. I could practically see the calculator in his head working at full speed. Daughter, worthless. Expelled. Daughter, CEO. Luxury house. Assets. That calculation determined his next move. As if entering a business negotiation, my father suddenly changed his tone. His shoulders relaxed. His voice softened into something I had never heard before, fawning, almost oily. "Kelly," he said, calling my name like a salesman greeting a potential client. "So, you're running a company now? That's incredible. Truly. I have to say, I see you in a new light." I looked at him quietly. The abruptness of his transformation was so extreme it was almost comical. "No, really," he continued, forcing a smile. "This is impressive. This makes your father proud. Right, dear?" He turned to my mother for agreement, but she still hadn't fully processed the situation and only nodded vaguely. Then came the pivot. "Well, actually," my father said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "I'm in a bit of trouble. My business hasn't been doing very well lately. Cash flow's been getting tight for some time now." He chose his words carefully, as if delivering a pitch to a potential investor. My mother clung to his arm and looked at me with wide, tearful eyes. Jenny watched him with concern. Right there in front of me, they began performing the role of a pitiful, struggling family. I stayed silent. I watched their act. This was it. The moment they grasped the scale of my success, what came to their minds wasn't congratulations or regret. It was usefulness. The daughter they had once discarded as worthless now looked like a source of money, a lifeline to save them from ruin. The sheer ugliness of it made me feel sick. Perhaps thinking I was starting to sympathize, my father pressed on. "Jenny's tuition, to be honest, is becoming very difficult to cover. At this rate, she might have to drop out of college." The instant I heard that, something inside me went ice cold. Jenny's tuition. That was the reason I had been thrown out of the house. What had once been their absolute justification was now being used as a tool to extract sympathy from me. My mother stepped closer. "Kelly, please." She reached for my hand, but I instinctively pulled it away. "Come back to us as our daughter again. You're a successful CEO now. Help your family. Please help your family." I looked down coldly at my mother's hand, left hanging in midair. Then I slowly scanned their faces, my mother looking up at me close to tears, my father staring with naked expectation, and Jenny biting her lip anxiously. "Family?" I asked quietly. "When exactly was I ever your family?" The question struck them like an unexpected blow. My mother gasped. My father's face shifted from shock to rising anger. They must have believed that no matter how cruelly they treated me, I still clung to the idea of family somewhere in my heart. That illusion needed to be severed completely. Just as they had severed me. "What are you saying?" my father snapped. "We're your parents. We're your family by blood." "By blood," I replied calmly. "Is that your definition of family? 3 years ago, you threw your blood-related daughter out of the house without hesitation, for one reason only: no investment value. Is that what family does? No. That's a business decision. You didn't treat me as your daughter. You treated me as a bad asset." I met my father's eyes and continued. "In that case, I'll treat you as a business proposition. I'm afraid I find no reason to invest even a single dollar in the project of saving you. The risk is too high, and the return is non-existent." "That's something you taught me yourself." His own words. 3 years later, they had come back to him like a boomerang. His face flushed red with anger, then drained pale with humiliation. He had nothing to say, because it was his own logic, his own philosophy. He had spent years believing in a world where only the strong survive. And now, in that very world, he was unmistakably on the side of the weak. Standing before him as the strong was the daughter he had once discarded. My mother tried a different approach. Her voice cracked. "Kelly, how could you say such things? We raised you for 18 years. We fed you, clothed you. Are you saying you've forgotten that debt?" A dry laugh escaped me. "What you gave me was the bare minimum to survive. You poured limitless love and opportunity into Jenny while I received scraps of attention. That is not a debt. That is not even a duty. Had you given me even half of what you gave Jenny, I might have achieved my success far earlier. Far greater." Jenny flinched. She looked up, her eyes wide and startled. Perhaps she had been unaware of her advantage all this time. Or maybe she had noticed, but turned a blind eye, unwilling to give up the comfort it brought her. My father opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "Mistake. I shook my head. No, it's not a mistake. It's a choice. You chose Jenny and discarded me. That is all. And the consequences of that choice are this situation right now. Can't pay for her tuition? She might have to drop out of college? That is not my responsibility. That is the inevitable result of your choice. My final words lit a fire in the last shards of my father's shattered pride. His face flushed with humiliation. His trembling finger pointed at me. Silence, he roared. Always twisting logic. That's why you were never likable. And now you succeed and lecture your parents? How dare you? There was no logic left in his words. Completely defeated and cornered, all he had left were hollow, vicious insults. And that final, desperate lashing out revealed his true nature perfectly. He never admitted fault. He only attacked and tried to eliminate anything that didn't suit him, just as he had done to me 3 years ago. Seeing that hideous truth, I understood completely. These people would never change. I turned my back and began walking along the stone path leading to the front door of my new home. Behind me, I heard my mother shout, "Wait, Kelly, don't go." But I didn't turn back. I am no longer your daughter. Placing my hand on the heavy oak door, I delivered my final words. I am Kelly Fisher, founder and CEO of Pfizer Enterprises. I have nothing to do with you anymore. They fell utterly silent. They knew the company's name. I was sure of that. It was a rising star in the industry where my father's business operated, a company that had grown rapidly over the past couple of years. He could never have imagined that the talented CEO leading it was the very daughter he had thrown out. That, I knew, was the final decisive blow. I stepped inside and slowly closed the door. The last thing I saw were their faces etched in despair, my father's rage, my mother's tears, Jenny's confusion. As the door closed with a heavy thud, my past was completely sealed away. I stood in the center of the spacious living room. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, painting streaks of gold across the polished hardwood floor. The house was still sparsely furnished, a few pieces of carefully chosen furniture, boxes waiting to be unpacked, and the faint smell of new paint and fresh wood. The silence felt comforting. 3 years of struggle had culminated in this very moment. There was a sense of accomplishment, yes, but there was no soaring joy, no cleansing relief. Instead, my heart felt astonishingly calm. When they had begged for money, any last flicker of feeling for them had vanished entirely. They were no longer my family. They were nothing more than former business associates. And that transaction was finished. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. The tap was filtered, a small luxury I had never thought I would appreciate. I leaned against the marble countertop and stared out the window at the moving truck as it pulled away. Weeks passed. My daily life revolved around managing my company. There were quarterly reports to review, new markets to analyze, client meetings to prepare for. The long evenings I spent immersed in work in my spacious home office brought me a fulfillment I had never known. I had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of my new life. I didn't dwell on the past. But the past, as it turned out, wasn't done with me. One afternoon, my personal assistant called me with a hint of unease in her voice. "Ma'am? Miss Jenny Fisher is on the line. She says it's about college tuition and insists on speaking with you directly." I paused. My pen hovered over a contract. Jenny. What could she possibly want now? I had instructed my assistant not to connect any calls from family. Still, the word tuition piqued a small spark of curiosity. Put her through. There was a click, and then Jenny's voice came through the receiver, sharp, displeased, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Kelly. It's me." "Yes, I know." "What do you want?" My voice sounded colder than even I expected. But I didn't soften it. "Let me get straight to the point. Because Dad's company is failing, my tuition can't be paid. So, logically, you should cover my tuition from now on. That's how it should be. So take care of it." I blinked. There was no plea in her voice. No humility. No acknowledgement of the 3 years I had spent clawing my way up from nothing. It was a decree delivered with the same entitlement she had always carried. "I refuse," I said quietly. Silence. Then, "What? Refuse? Jenny's voice rose. Wait a minute. The money you make is thanks to mom and dad raising you in the first place. Don't you think you can help out a little? Is that too much to ask? Her outrage was exactly what I expected. Deep down, she still thought she was superior. She believed my success was a fluke, that I was supposed to be the one who struggled, and she was entitled to the fruits of my labor. You're living in a luxury house, spending extravagantly, and you don't even care that mom and dad are miserable because of it, Jenny continued, her voice growing shrill. You should think about your family at least a little. You ungrateful. I listened silently as she vented. When she finally ran out of breath, I spoke. Jenny, you still don't understand anything, do you? What do you mean? I set down my pen and leaned back in my chair. The money I earned wasn't because of any help you gave me. It was because you kicked me out. And in a way, I'm thankful for it. Without the weight of your expectations, I was free to carve out my own path. Don't be ridiculous. Which one of us is being ridiculous? I continued. Do you really understand where your tuition money came from? It was earned by dad and mom. And now that source has dried up. That's all there is to it. You've been living on the infrastructure of your parents' assets without the ability or the need to earn for yourself. But that infrastructure no longer exists. I heard Jenny gulp on the other end of the line. The problem you're facing now, tuition you can't pay, possibly having to drop out, is exactly the same problem I faced 3 years ago. The difference is that I had nobody to help me. You still have your parents, though they seem unable to do anything now. I delivered the final, decisive line. Earn it yourself. Or drop out. Those are your two options, Jenny. Just like me 3 years ago. Welcome to the real world. I ended the call without waiting for her reply. Immediately, I pressed the internal line button on my desk. Yes, ma'am, my assistant replied calmly. Block any future calls from Jenny Fisher and anyone else with the Fisher surname. Do not forward any of their messages to me. Ever again. Understood. After giving the instructions and hanging up, the office returned to complete silence. Yet inside me, a quiet fire was burning, not the hot rage of 3 years ago, but a cold, steady flame of resolve. Jenny's shameless demands. My father's ugly tantrums. My mother's calculating tears. They had learned nothing, reflected on nothing. Now, as the CEO, it was my responsibility to protect my brand and my company. I had to neutralize the risk they posed once and for all. I opened my laptop and began to type. My business social media account had tens of thousands of followers, investors, partners, clients, and industry peers. I usually posted about market trends, leadership strategies, and company milestones. But today, I wrote something different. Today, I want to share a small, personal story. It's about why I have completely withdrawn from the most challenging investment of all, family. 3 years ago, my family deemed me not worth investing in and kicked me out with nothing but a few dollars. I had no educational opportunities, no support for my future. Recently, after starting my own company, they suddenly appeared, not to congratulate me, but to demand millions of dollars to save their failing business. Today, my sister, who has benefited from my sacrifices, called me. She assumed I was obligated to cover her college tuition. I refuse all these unreasonable demands. This is not revenge. This is a CEO's decision to protect my life and the lives of my employees. If you are going to invest in something, I sincerely hope it will be in something that enriches your own dignity and your own future. I read the post twice, then 3 times. Then I hit publish. The response was immediate. My smartphone buzzed incessantly, notifications flooding in faster than I could read them. Support. Encouragement. A few angry comments from strangers who didn't know the full story, but those were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of validation. The post spread rapidly. Local online news outlets picked it up. Business blogs shared it. Within days, almost everyone connected to my parents. Former business partners, members of my mother's community, even distant relatives, had seen it. And then came the collapse. My father's company, already struggling, lost what little support it had left. The few remaining business partners withdrew all at once. One former partner gave a brief interview to a local news station, Who would continue doing business with a man who throws his own daughter out of the house? My father lost all credibility. He never recovered. My mother was effectively expelled from the upscale residential community that had once been her greatest source of identity. Friends who had once competed with her in displays of status suddenly turned their backs. They avoided her openly, mocked her behind closed doors. Their house was foreclosed. Every piece of jewelry, every luxury brand item that had once supported her pride was sold off to pay debts. And then there was Jenny. She became known on campus as the sister who tried to extort money. She lost her place entirely. Friends drifted away. Professors looked at her differently. Eventually, with no tuition and no support, she dropped out of college. No work experience. No skills. Only an oversized sense of entitlement. She now wanders from one relative to another, begging for money. Or so I've heard. No one helps her. I began receiving belated messages of sympathy and admiration from relatives who had once looked down on me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had attended Jenny's graduation party and not bothered to ask where I was. They sent long, rambling texts about family unity and forgiveness. I instructed my assistant to block them all. How they live their lives now is no longer any concern of mine. My social media post was not an act of revenge. It was, in a sense, an IPO announcement. A public declaration that ownership of my life belongs entirely to me. I am not my family's daughter. I am not my sister's safety net. I am not my father's failed investment. I am Kelly Fisher, founder and CEO of Pfizer Enterprises. My focus is not on their past. It is on my company's future. Next quarter's goals. Expansion into new markets. The lives of my employees, people who show up every day and do the work, people I support and who support me in return. I will continue building a life that depends on no one. Their story is over. Mine has only just begun.